Imagine this. You wake up. The morning light is filtering through your curtains. You stretch. And for the first time in weeks, you actually feel fantastic. You feel rested, sharp, and ready to conquer the day. But before you even get out of bed, you reach for your phone. You open your sleep tracking app, and staring back at you in glaring red numbers is a sleep score of 62. Suddenly, that bright morning feels a little heavier. You start questioning yourself. Am I actually tired? Did I not get enough deep sleep? Within seconds, a tiny piece of technology has completely rewritten your own physical reality.
It is a profoundly modern phenomenon. Millions of us are waking up every single day and asking a silicon chip on our wrist or our finger, "How did I sleep?" Instead of asking ourselves, we have essentially outsourced our bodily intuition to an algorithm. And the fascinating, perhaps slightly unsettling part is that this algorithm is often giving us an incomplete picture.
Exactly. We treat these devices like they're omniscient mind-reading machines that can peer directly into our dreams. But they aren't, are they? If we really pull back the curtain on the wearable tech industry, the story gets incredibly complicated. Because what if your sleep tracker isn't actually tracking your sleep at all? What if it is just making a really, really good guess?
That is the perfect way to phrase it. It is a highly educated guess. The biggest misconception in the consumer health space today is the assumption that a smart ring or a watch can see sleep. They cannot. If you go into a clinical sleep laboratory, the gold standard for measuring sleep is something called polysomnography. It is an intensive process. They wire you up to measure your actual brainwaves, your rapid eye movements, your muscle activity, your breathing rate, and the precise oxygen levels in your blood. That is direct measurement.
Right, and obviously, nobody wants to sleep with 30 wires glued to their scalp every night just to know if they hit REM sleep.
Precisely. So, consumer wearables had to find a workaround. Since they cannot directly measure your brainwaves, they rely on secondary biological signals. They measure movement through accelerometers. They track your heart rate, the microscopic variations between your heartbeats, and shifts in your skin temperature. Then, they take all of that raw data, feed it into an artificial intelligence model, and look for patterns that typically correlate with being asleep.
So, to use a metaphor, it is like trying to figure out what movie is playing inside a theater. The clinical sleep lab is sitting in the front row, watching the screen, but the wearable device is standing out in the lobby, listening to the muffled bass through the walls, feeling the vibration on the floor, and trying to guess if it is an action movie or a romance.
That is a brilliant analogy. And because the wearable is standing in the lobby, it can easily be fooled. Let us say you have a lot of anxiety about a presentation at work. You are lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, completely awake, but you are perfectly still. Your heart rate might drop just enough, and your movement is zero. To the algorithm, you look like you are in a light stage of sleep.
Even though my mind is racing at 100 miles an hour.
Exactly. Conversely, you might be a restless sleeper who tosses and turns while deeply unconscious. The device feels that heavy movement and assumes you must be awake, ruining your sleep score for the night. This is why the precise estimation of REM, or deep sleep stages, can vary so wildly from device to device. They simply do not have the laboratory-level precision to know exactly when you cross the threshold of consciousness.
Which brings us to a really dark irony. We buy these devices to improve our health, to optimize our recovery. But for a growing number of people, the device itself becomes the source of the problem. There is a real psychological cost to this data, isn't there?
A massive psychological cost. Researchers have actually coined a term for it, orthosomnia. It is the unhealthy, almost compulsive obsession with achieving the perfect sleep score. We see people whose sleep hygiene is theoretically flawless, yet they are suffering from insomnia simply because they are terrified of their wearable's judgment the next morning. The anxiety of wanting to sleep well activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, which is the exact opposite state your body needs to be in to actually fall asleep.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You stress about the score, the stress ruins your sleep, the score drops, and the next night you're even more stressed. I have heard stories of people lying completely rigid in bed, afraid to shift their weight because they don't want the accelerometer to penalize their deep sleep metrics.
It is tragic, but it highlights a fundamental misunderstanding of what this technology is meant to do. Technology designed to reduce stress is actively generating it, because we are treating the data as an absolute diagnosis rather than a flexible mirror.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here. If the data isn't perfectly accurate, if it's just an estimate that can be fooled by lying still, and if it's causing mass anxiety, why should we wear them at all? Why not just throw the trackers in the drawer and go back to trusting our gut?
Because while the absolute daily score might be flawed, the long-term trend is incredibly powerful. This is the crucial pivot in how we need to think about wearables. The goal is not perfection on a Tuesday night. The goal is baseline awareness over a span of months.
So, zooming out instead of zooming in.
Exactly. Let us say the tracker's estimation of your deep sleep is off by 20 minutes every night. That absolute error doesn't matter if the device is consistently wrong in the exact same way, because what you are looking for is deviation from your own baseline. If you notice that every time you have 2 glasses of wine with dinner, your resting heart rate spikes and your sleep becomes fragmented, that is actionable intelligence. If your heart rate variability, or HRV, is steadily declining over a 3-week period, your body is screaming that it is under-recovered and heading for burnout.
That makes total sense. It is not about whether I got exactly 42 minutes of RAM. It is about recognizing that when I work late, my nervous system stays elevated until 3 a.m. It is pattern recognition.
And pattern recognition is where the true power of modern health intelligence lies. Sleep data in isolation is actually quite limited, but when you combine sleep data with daytime stress trends, temperature fluctuations, and recovery signals like HRV, you suddenly have a comprehensive map of your autonomic nervous system.
Which sounds exactly like the philosophy behind the OXYZEN ecosystem. It feels like the market is finally moving away from just throwing raw numbers at a user and expecting them to be a doctor.
That is the necessary evolution. The future of wearable technology does not depend on cramming more sensors into a ring or a watch to collect more raw data. We already have enough data. The future is about meaningful interpretation. Artificial intelligence is now stepping in to bridge that gap. Instead of an app just saying, "You slept poorly," an intelligent system can analyze the relationships between your metabolism, your stress load, and your sleep and say, "Your nervous system is struggling to regulate because of chronic late-day stress."
It shifts the burden. The technology does the heavy analytical lifting, so the human doesn't have to obsess over the numbers. But that brings me to a deeper, almost philosophical question. As AI gets better at interpreting our biology, how do we make sure we don't completely lose touch with ourselves? How do we balance this incredible health intelligence with simple, fundamental body awareness?
That is the most important question of all. A wearable device, no matter how advanced the AI or how sleek the ceramic ring, should only ever complement the human experience. It must never override it. If your body tells you that you are exhausted, but your app says you are fully recovered, you listen to your body. If you feel vibrant and alive, but your app gives you a low score, you trust your vitality. The human nervous system is infinitely more complex, profound, and nuanced than any single metric or dashboard could ever capture.
We have to remember that the wearable doesn't improve our health. It just holds up a mirror. Understanding our own physiology and actually making the behavioral changes, that is what improves health.
Exactly. The tracker is the compass, but you are still the one who has to walk the path. Imperfect signals can still point you in the right direction as long as you know how to read them intelligently.
Which is such a liberating way to look at it. We don't need to be slaves to the score anymore. Your sleep tracker might not be a perfect medical instrument. It might guess, it might estimate, and sometimes it might just be flat out wrong. But if you step back and look at the broader picture, it might just reveal the silent patterns your body has been desperately trying to communicate to you for years.
And learning to translate that silent language, moving from raw data to true biological wisdom, that is the real frontier of human health.
A perfect thought to end on. We are learning to listen again, just with a little bit of high-tech translation. This is OXYZEN Health Intelligence. Until next time, sleep well and remember to check in with yourself before you check your screen.